April 1814. A fallen emperor arrives. His exile begins, but ambition never truly sleeps. Elba Island, 12,000 souls. A tiny cage for a mind built for empires. Napoleon Bonaparte. Europe's monarchs celebrate their victory, blind to the storm gathering quietly. They believed he would rot here, forgotten, but silence is a strategist's best weapon. Less than a year later, he reclaims Paris, a miraculous resurrection defying all odds. How does a betrayed outcast return to power? Desperation breeds the most audacious plans. With just 700 loyal men, he orchestrated history's greatest theft of a nation. Elba, May 1814. He rides his tiny domain daily. Physical confinement sharpens mental focus. Once commanding millions, he now inspects fishing boats. True leaders adapt to any scale. The architect of Europe's laws now settles farmer disputes. Patience masks his ultimate design. Paris restored the Bourbon kings, yet the people's whispers of the emperor never faded. King Louis XVIII struggled to fill Napoleon's boots. A throne cannot buy true loyalty. Economic hardship bred resentment. A quiet storm of revolution was brewing once again. Secret letters crossed the sea. Intelligence is the lifeblood of any successful rebellion. France was unhappy. The eagle saw its chance to fly back to Paris. February 1815. He secretly prepares his tiny guard. Small forces require perfect discipline. Under the cover of darkness, they board the ship. Secrecy guarantees the initiative. Evading the British blockades was purely luck. Bold moves often invite sudden miracles. March 1st, he lands in southern France. The ultimate gamble has officially begun. Only a few hundred men against a kingdom. Supreme confidence conquers overwhelming odds. Loyalists brought him secret news. Exiled physically, his network remained deeply embedded. France's army suffered under the new king. Hunger makes men miss their emperor. Europe thought he was entirely finished. They critically underestimated his endless patience. He mapped the coastline perfectly from memory. Genius requires obsessive geographic mastery, tracking enemy regiments and loyal generals. Every wooden block represented human lives. He calculated the exact safe route to Paris. Precision prevents unnecessary bloodshed. His British Guard had predictable romantic habits. Love affairs create fatal security blind spots. He gardened quietly while plotting war. Feigning weakness is the ultimate disguise. By February, he had everything prepared entirely. Only the perfect moment was missing. The British observer finally sailed away. A tiny mistake sparked a massive empire. The tiny fleet sails into absolute darkness. Destiny demands a leap of pure faith. Landing in France, they march rapidly north. Speed creates an illusion of massive strength. Local peasants cheer the returning beloved emperor. Shared hatred of kings unites the poor. Panic suddenly strikes the royal Parisian palace. Fear travels faster than any marching army. The panicked king sends heavily armed troops. Authority means nothing without soldiers' true respect. The two nervous armies finally meet quietly. A single gunshot could end European history. Napoleon steps forward, alone opening his coat. Vulnerability becomes the ultimate weapon of influence. He challenges them to shoot their emperor. Psychological warfare beats cold steel every time. Weeping soldiers throw down their royal flags. Pure charisma shatters an entire kingdom's defense. The combined army marches toward Paris united. Bloodless victories are history's most terrifying events. Midnight escape begins disguised as British ships. Deception is the ultimate strategic camouflage. The tiny fleet enters dangerous open waters. Silence masks their truly audacious ambition. Sailing into pure darkness invites disaster. Calculated risks separate emperors from ordinary generals. A royalist warship suddenly blocks their path. One wrong move guarantees immediate execution. Soldiers hide silently below the wooden deck. Invisible threats paralyze the strongest opponents. He stands visibly on the exposed bow. Extreme boldness creates psychological blind spots. The enemy asks casually about Elba. Arrogance constantly blinds those currently in power. They sail past without firing a shot. A master manipulator relies on perception. March 1st, 1815, they finally land. Every footstep echoes a massive rebellion, marching confidently toward an army 10 times larger. True kings never run away. They march on poor dirt roads. True momentum builds from the ground up. Royalist generals receive the shocking news. Bureaucracy moves slowly against sheer willpower. Villagers offer food and fresh horses. Ideology feeds an army better than gold. The king orders troops to intercept. Force often fails against beloved symbols. Campfires burn along the mountain paths. Rest is brief when destiny calls. He plots the path to Grenoble. Controlling key cities breaks enemy morale. A royal regiment blocks the road. The first real test of loyalty approaches. Both sides load their deadly weapons. Silence screams louder than roaring cannons. He walks toward the loaded muskets. Ultimate bravery shatters military discipline completely. Royalist soldiers drop their guns cheering. Hearts are conquered faster than territories. He walks directly into the firing line. Absolute conviction paralyzes an armed opponent. Stopping just feet from certain death, the tension becomes a suffocating psychological weight. Removing his hat respectfully, a gentle gesture disarms the most hostile military mind. Offering his own life to his men, true loyalty demands ultimate personal sacrifice. Opening his coat to the bullets. Naked vulnerability is history's strongest armor. Officers scream desperate orders. Formal rank shatters against raw emotional connection. Rifles slowly drop one by one. The spell of the Bourbon King breaks completely. A single cheer ignites the entire regiment. Passion overwhelms artificial political loyalty entirely. Men swarm their returning emperor. A military unit becomes a devoted family again. The royalist blocking force becomes his vanguard. Bloodless conquest is the ultimate strategic victory. He stands perfectly calm among them. Anticipating human nature is true military genius. This was never a military operation. It was a purely psychological masterpiece. Grenoble opens its heavy stone gates. Cities fall when their defenders' hearts change. 6 days in France without firing. Bloodless victories echo longest in history. Marshal Ney marches south to intercept. The king's final hope rides out confidently. Ney promises the king an iron cage. Bold boasts often hide deep insecurities. A promised iron cage for the emperor. Humiliation is the weapon of terrified kings. March 10th in the capital city. Power centers radiate anxiety during crisis. The king summons his best commander. Desperate monarchs rely on borrowed military strength. Marshal Ney arrives highly decorated. Medals cannot shield a man from destiny. The panicked king begs his commander. Desperation infects the highest royal authority. Ney promises to stop the emperor. Overconfidence precedes catastrophic historical betrayals. He vows an iron cage return. Extreme promises mask deep internal doubts. The court applauds his bravado. Applause cannot stop a psychological avalanche. 6,000 elite soldiers stand ready. Superior numbers fail without true conviction. Ney marches his massive army southward. Physical momentum clashes with psychological warfare. His officers march with complete certainty. Blind faith ignores shifting political realities. They possess overwhelming numbers, but a legendary symbol easily disrupts mathematical advantages. March 14th brings unexpected intelligence. Reality shatters the royalists' careful strategic assumptions. Citizens openly cheer the advancing emperor. Information warfare destroys the defensive lines. Royalist soldiers receive letters from home. Emotional warfare undermines strict military commands. Ney orders his men to ignore the letters. Denying reality accelerates inevitable defeat. Napoleon writes a personal letter to Ney. A pen often defeats an entire army. He appeals to their shared battlefield history. Brotherhood always outlasts fragile political treaties. Ney reads the emperor's words alone. Internal conflict tears down his royalist loyalty. Morning arrives with a critical decision. He faces the men who bled together. Looking at the medals of his veterans, shared scars forge unbreakable psychological bonds. Ney declares the Bourbon cause is lost forever. Truth shatters the royal illusion perfectly. 6,000 men instantly erupt in cheers. The king's greatest shield becomes his executioner. Ney rides out to rejoin his former master. Destiny pulls the strongest men backward. Ney dismounts facing his former master. Betrayal carries a heavy psychological burden. Napoleon warmly embraces the conflicted marshal. Forgiveness is the ultimate strategic manipulation. The royal promise shatters completely. Deeply rooted brotherhood always overrides recent political oaths. 7,000 men march on Paris. Unstoppable momentum terrifies those clinging to power. The king receives the devastating news. Sudden panic destroys every royal strategic calculation. Royal ministers stand entirely paralyzed. A collapsing regime breeds deafening political silence. The panicked king frantically packs his bags. Survival instincts strip away royal dignity. Not a single shot was fired. Pure charisma conquered a heavily armed nation. Paris sees an empty royal throne. Power vacuums create massive societal anxiety. The king flees into the midnight darkness. Cowardice permanently erases any remaining authority. He travels silently through the night. The greatest conquests happen entirely in shadows. Servants find the king completely vanished. Authority evaporates instantly when the throne empties. He enters Paris without any resistance. Whispers of his return spread like wildfire. Citizens flood the narrow city streets. A legendary figure commands absolute public fascination. Thousands swarm his royal carriage completely. Extreme adoration easily overwhelms standard military security. Soldiers struggle against the joyful mob. True power resides fully with the people. Desperate hands reach for the carriage. They wildly worship a man defying kings. The emperor finally steps outside completely. His mere presence violently electrifies the masses. Loyal officers form a protective circle. Extreme devotion border closely on dangerous fanaticism. The crowd presses from every direction. He rides the dangerous wave of revolution. Crowds throw flowers at his feet. Savior complexes intoxicate the desperate masses completely. He walks through his old palace. Reclaiming past glory always feels slightly surreal. The king left important papers behind. Sudden panic destroys basic royal administrative protocols. Paris enthusiastically celebrates the peaceful night. Brief joy masks the looming continental storm. 19 days to conquer a nation. Supreme audacity rewrites the limits of possibility. He knows what the crowds ignore. Kings across Europe are plotting his demise. Allied monarchs instantly receive the news. Mutual fear unites formerly bitter political enemies. 700,000 soldiers mobilize quickly. An entire continent prepares to crush him. He has only one viable option. Striking first destroys massive numerical enemy advantages. He meticulously designs a brilliant attack. True masterminds isolate and crush divided enemies. He commands a smaller force against overwhelming odds. Brilliance thrives in pure desperation. Allied armies converge rapidly from every direction. The hunter quickly becomes the hunted. He calculates a mathematically perfect central strike. Dividing enemies shatters their combined strength. British forces wait to the west unaware. Surprise relies on incredibly precise timing. Prussians march east entirely separated from allies. A divided shield breaks very easily. He drives his army straight between them. Bold wedges destroy slow military coalitions. June 16th brings brutal combat at Ligny. First strikes carry maximum psychological terror. The emperor coldly watches the chaotic slaughter. True commanders must completely suppress empathy. The Prussian commander falls heavily during retreat. Losing a leader destroys army morale. Prussians flee the battlefield entirely broken. The first half of his plan succeeds. He believes the Prussians are completely destroyed. Overconfidence breeds fatal strategic blindness. A detachment is sent to chase them. Dividing forces risks catastrophic isolation later. He turns his full wrath toward the British. Annihilation requires singular brutal focus. The British commander waits on a high ridge. Favorable terrain multiplies defensive power. Dark storm clouds gather over the Belgian fields. Nature silently dictates military destinies. Torrential rain turns the battlefield into thick mud. Weather destroys the best plans. Cannons sink deep into the heavy, wet earth. Loss of mobility kills armies. June 18th dawns, cold and miserably wet. Waiting paralyzes the attacking commander's mind. He delays the attack to dry the ground. Time is the ultimate unforgiving enemy. The British infantry waits patiently behind the ridge. Silence amplifies the looming terror. The fatal delay costs him the entire empire. Hubris often ignores the ticking clock. Prussian forces march relentlessly toward the battlefield. Vengeance fuels an incredibly terrifying military speed. Grouchy blindly follows outdated orders into the woods. Blind obedience destroys brilliant strategic designs. Noon arrives, and the massive assault finally begins. Unleashed violence shatters the tense silence. French infantry charges up the slippery, muddy slope. Frontal assaults cost thousands of lives. The enemy line bends but refuses to break. Frustration poisons the commander's brilliant mind. Wellington brilliantly throws his reserves into the bloody gaps. Resilience outlasts the fiercest attacks. He anxiously checks his silver pocket watch again. Time transforms into an absolute enemy. He peers through his telescope at distant dust. False hope frequently precedes total devastation. Black eagles emerge clearly from the dust. Misread symbols guarantee absolute strategic ruin. Fresh troops crush his exhausted right flank. Perfect timing shatters weary human limits. Distant cannons echo clearly through the trees. Blind obedience actively destroys common sense. Grouchy strictly follows outdated and useless orders. Bureaucracy murders the greatest imperial dreams. He deploys his legendary untouched personal reserve. True desperation demands the ultimate gamble. The undefeated Imperial Guard marches perfectly upward. Legendary reputations create terrifying battlefield presence. The British commander patiently waits, then strikes. Patience is a killer's sharpest blade. Devastating cannon fire hits the advancing veterans. Flesh constantly fails against concentrated steel. The immortal guard suddenly breaks and runs. Invincible myths dissolve violently into mud. Watching the elite flee destroys all hope. Fear instantly infects an entire army. Total collapse transforms an organized army into terrified individuals. Chaos always devours discipline. Prussian cavalry ruthlessly cuts down the fleeing French survivors. Vengeance erases all battlefield mercy. The emperor watches his entire majestic creation violently dissolve. Absolute power crumbles into mud. Loyal marshals desperately beg their paralyzed commander to flee. Defeat completely breaks a genius. He stands frozen, watching the absolute end of everything. A god becomes mortal again. He finally turns his horse away from the slaughter. The greatest empire dies quietly. 8 hours of brutal combat erase 19 days of brilliance. Glory demands heavy prices. The miraculous bloodless conquest ends here in violent tragedy. Ambition eventually consumes its creator. June 22nd, 1815 arrives, with grim finality. Inc formally surrenders physical power. He formally abdicates his imperial throne for the second time. History closes its chapter. St. Helena is a dark volcanic rock. True exile crushes the spirit slowly. 2,000 kilometers from any coast. Isolation is the ultimate prison for ambition. 6 final years without armies or maps. Silence eventually defeats the loudest conquerors. He dictates his legend for future generations. Myths always outlive the mortal men.